And welcome back to the show. I'm really excited about our next guest and honored because Mike Bianchi is one of the best sports writers in the country. There's no denying that. He's been doing it for a long time at the Orlando Sentinel. He has a great show too, by the way, radio show in Orlando, 96.9 FM, simulcast on 740 AM. And whenever I'm driving from St. Augustine to Jupiter and back when I'm doing the PGA Tour stuff, I got to dial him in because Mike gets the callers, the crazy callers, and it's a nice back and forth. Mike Bianchi, our guest. Mike, man, it's so good to see you. Oh, I forgot to tell everybody, we went to school together back in the day. That was pretty cool, right?
Back in the day, a long time ago, Doug. Yeah, it's good to see you again. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, it's fun. Last week, Mike, I took my wife, who had not been to Florida. She's a University of Alabama girl. And I took her to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, Steve Spurrier Field, the Heisman statues, the whole 9 yards, gave her the tour. Man, it's so good to be back. When you haven't been to a place you really love and you haven't been back in many, many years, to go back, it's memory lane, Mike, but it brings back a lot of great memories.
Absolutely. It's nostalgic. I mean, I go there obviously all the time to cover games. But, yeah, I still walk by the old journalism school sometimes when I'm on campus. And, yeah, it's always good to go back to your old school.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that's what we wanted to talk to you about. Obviously, you're down there in the heart of Gator country, Seminole country. Oh, my. Couple of tough seasons. And even UCF, our friend Gus Malzahn, the head coach, in the transition to the Big 12, that's kind of been a rough go. I mean, Mike, is it all negative callers calling into the show, or is there any positivity with those three programs?
Actually, Napier obviously started out. I mean, he's been on the hot seat since game one where they got blown out at home at Miami, and then Texas A&M comes into the swamp as well. And, they get clobbered by Texas A&M, and everybody was reporting, hey, Billy Napier is already gone. The boosters have already raised the money, the $30 million to fire him and his staff. Well, it turns out, actually over the last few weeks, Billy Napier has gained some momentum. It's not been all negative, quite frankly. The Gators won 3 of 4 at one point. Should have probably beaten Tennessee on the road, but Graham Mertz, their starting quarterback, goes down after throwing a touchdown pass in that game. Florida's up by 10 in the third quarter. Graham Mertz goes out, and then they end up losing that game in overtime. And then, they're beating Georgia Saturday at the Swamp, playing really well. The defense was rising up. Carson Beck had thrown 3 picks. It looked like the Gators were gaining some momentum, and then DJ Lagway goes down with the injury. So I think there's a segment of Gator fans, a growing segment that's like, hey, maybe the Gators are starting to play a little better under Billy Napier. They've improved from the beginning of the year. If not for the injuries, who knows where they would be. I actually think Billy Napier might save his job.
Well, I really think, and it's obvious as you watch those games, the team is playing hard for him. You hadn't lost the team. Obviously, a few key injuries here or there will affect anybody, but I like what he's doing. Now, up the road in Tallahassee, Mike, Mike Norvell, oh my goodness. This is tough times at FSU, despite that 12-0 run last year. Since then, it's been abysmal, Mike.
Yeah, and I wrote a notes column that just went online, and the headline is FSU is the worst Power 4 team in all of college football. And when you think about it, they are. They're 1-8. Their offense is at the bottom. There's no FBS offense worse than Florida State's. They can't score. They're only averaging like 14 points per game. They're only averaging 260 yards per game. So I think they're worse than Purdue in the Big Ten. I think they're worse than Oklahoma State in the Big 12.
Wow.
Heck, I even think they're worse than Cal, which is the only team they've beaten this year. In Cal, when you go back to that game in Tallahassee, Cal outgained them by like 150 yards, and FSU ends up winning at the end 14-9 with Cal driving down the field. I don't know what's happened. It is the most, as Bobby Bowden would say, the most – dadgummit, this is just bumfuzzling. I don't know what happened, but it's the most bumfuzzling thing I've ever seen. A team go from undefeated in the regular season last year to the worst team in the Power 4 in 1 year. So, yeah, it's bad. And here's what makes it especially bad. Florida State just started this stadium renovation up in Tallahassee, and they essentially, before they started it, they told their existing season ticket holders, hey, the price of tickets is going way up. And
geez.
they priced a lot of fans from their old seats because, they're building all these new amenities and all this stuff. So they raised the prices exorbitantly. And now they've got to sell these tickets with, a 1-8 record on their way to 2-10. I mean, I think the only game they're going to win is like Charleston Southern, which is left on their schedule. So, yeah, it's really bad at Florida State because of the financial picture. We know what their finances were, Doug. That's why they were suing to get out of the ACC. And now this happens. Yeah, it is a bleak picture in Tallahassee.
Well, I mean, it's terrible. It's unbelievable, really, how it's fallen off the tracks. And as you describe it, I mean, the 12-0 start just really masked problems that were internal, and Coach Saban brought it out on game day about the transfers. If you don't bring in the right guys, you're out of luck. Right. He made the famous statement there. I wonder, Mike, and with Coach Prime in Colorado on the verge of potentially making the playoffs if they can finish strong here, any chance at all of Deion Sanders coming back home to FSU in the near future?
Well, again, I mean, we saw what Jimbo Fisher's buyout was at Texas A&M, like $75 million.
Right.
Mike Norvell, I mean, he's got the same age as Jimmy Sexton. I don't know why these college ADs keep falling for it, but Mike Norvell's buyout, if they were to buy him out this season, it would be $70-some million.
Man.
To buy out him and his staff. And as I just mentioned, Florida State isn't exactly rolling in the dough right now. So I would be shocked. I mean, he signed the 8-year extension when he flirted with Alabama last year. He got that extension. I don't understand why these ADs spend money like drunken sailors when it comes to extending these coaching contracts. But Mike Norvell got the big extension. So I would be shocked if they were to fire him after this season and try to bring in Coach Prime. But then you get to thinking about it. If you want a guy to sell tickets in that new stadium, a guy who's going to create a buzz immediately, Deion Sanders would be the guy, obviously.
Yeah, that would make a few headlines, and I think he's proving that with this new era of college football, the transfers, et cetera, that he's pretty good at it. He seemingly knows what he's doing. All right, let's go down to UCF. Of course, you're right there in Orlando. Our old buddy Gus Malzahn, who got run out of town at Auburn. And since then, Auburn has had nothing to cheer about. But I do think UCF has kind of jumped into the Shark Tank, right? The Big 12, even though it's a new Big 12, it's a step up in competition. Is that the issue right now?
It's a step up in competition. It's a step up in, you look at UC, and again, UCF, their fans think that because of 2017 and 2018 when they had the back-to-back unbeaten seasons, they think that's what they expect now. And it's like, wait a minute, you were in the American then, you're jumping into the Big 12. Every team in that conference has a bigger budget than UCF. They have better facilities than UCF. So, yeah, it is a step up in competition, and Gus Malzahn has tried to remedy that through the portal. He's actually recruited really well. I mean, they were the only Big 12 newcomer last year that made a bowl game, even though they lost the bowl game. I thought last year was a decent season for their first year in the Big 12. They made a bowl game. They lost the bowl game, but then this season – here's where I think Gus made a mistake. He came into this season like, instead of saying, hey, it's a process. We just want to be a little better than we were last year. No, he was like, hey, we can win the championship. He made all of these changes. He brought in KJ Jefferson, spent a boatload of NIL money on him, and he sort of rose the expectations to a place where I thought they were a little I thought some of the expectations were delusional. All right, if they could have won 8 games this year, I think it would have been a good year. But Gus had people thinking they were going to compete for the conference championship, and that just wasn't the case. Especially when we've seen we saw how Florida State missed on their quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei. Well, Gus missed bad on KJ Jefferson because he came in to camp out of shape, didn't look good, couldn't throw the ball down the field, and now Gus is on his fourth starting quarterback.
Well, we're going to get to some positive news in the state of Florida because Mario Cristobal's got a pretty good.
Oh, yeah,
he's doing pretty good down in Miami.
Well, they say in Florida, the further south you go, the further north you actually go.
Yeah, there you go. But again, the Hurricanes haven't had a lot to cheer about for a long time. Right. And, as you mentioned, they got the quarterback. And he's playing at a high level, experienced guy, older guy. And they're going to ride him as far as they can. The defense may be a little suspect here or there, but it is the ACC. So Miami's got a shot here, and with those first rankings coming out, they're in really good shape.
Yeah, they're in the top four. They're ranked fourth, and they haven't beaten anybody. They had a shootout with Louisville. There's not a ranked team on their schedule now or in the future. So it looks like they're going to go through their entire ACC schedule. In Florida, of course, they played early in the season without playing a ranked team, but they can score. You're right. They do have the quarterback in Cam Ward. They have obviously the receiving combination. We saw what Xavier Restrepo did last week and has been doing, and it just goes to show, again, Florida State wanted Cam Ward, but they got outbid by Miami for him, and they ended up with DJU. Miami ends up with Cam Ward. I'm not saying Florida State would be unbeaten if they had Cam Ward because they can't run the ball, and their receivers can't catch the ball either. So, but still, Cam Ward has made a huge difference. And Miami, you're right, they haven't done anything for 2 decades now. Yeah. They've been in the ACC. This is their 20th year in the ACC. They've never won it.
Incredible.
In fact, I always blame Miami and, to a lesser extent, Florida State. FSU's complaining about the TV money in the ACC. Well, I'm saying, if FSU and Miami had held up their end of the bargain when these TV contracts were growing, the ACC would have a bigger TV contract because everybody expected it was going to be Miami and Florida State competing for the championship every year. That was going to be the big two atop the ACC, sort of like Michigan and Ohio State or Alabama and Georgia in the SEC now. Well, it never happened, and Miami finally, it looks like, is going to have a chance to win an ACC title this year.
Mike, as you break it down, we've broken down all the big schools now, and I still harken back to the days, oh my goodness, Coach Spurrier, Coach Meyer, Billy Donovan. But anyway, I digress. The good old days. But I do believe with this massive TV contract the Southeastern Conference has with ABC, ESPN, Disney, Florida's in the best shape of all the schools in the state. Don't you agree? I mean, the money will never stop coming in. I mean, obviously the league is tough. But I think when all is said and done, I think Florida's probably still the bell cow, wouldn't you say, as far as monetary, et cetera?
Yeah, but yes, obviously as far as money, tradition, the number of rich boosters that can contribute to NIL, all of that, yeah, but let's face it, Florida's had more money than Florida State and Miami for
forever.
Generations.
Forever.
Generations.
Right.
Okay. And Miami and Florida State, rose to prominence during the 80s when Florida was on probation under Charlie Pell, and that sort of allowed Florida State and Miami to build their programs. Well, yes, money matters, but also schedule matters. When you look at the ACC and the path to get into the playoff, I mean, Florida is still, in my opinion, they could be who knows how long. I mean, they're at the bottom half of the SEC right now with Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC. I just think it's going to be harder and harder to sustain excellence. I mean, I think we're seeing it right now when you've got Indiana atop the Big Ten now. You've got, SMU atop the ACC. I think with all the roster turnover, you're not going to see the dominance you saw when Nick Saban was ruling the SEC. Even Georgia right now is, I don't think they're as dominant as they've been in the past. I just don't think you're going to see that much dominance from year to year to year. You may see some wild swings in college football.
Mike, it's interesting you say that. And listen, I have a lot of friends, as you do, from Auburn. And it's like, hey, give Hugh Freeze some time. Everything will be fine. I'm like, you guys don't realize how good the other programs are getting and how things are all leveling off now. Parity has set in, especially college football. And Auburn and Mississippi State and some of these other schools, it's going to be a tough go. And perhaps Florida's in that same bailiwick. I mean, it's tough to get up to the top now because you're going to have to pass a lot of people, and it's hard to pass all those good teams.
And here's the other thing. I mean, with the portal the way it is, with NIL
Yes.
the way it is, Alabama, going back to the days of Bear Bryant, and obviously with Nick Saban was able to stash players on that
Sure.
roster and develop them. Now, guess what? If they're not playing at Alabama, if they're not playing at Florida or Florida State, hey, I'll just go to UCF right down the road, and I can
Right.
start and I can play big-time football there. You've got a lot of emerging programs as well that weren't around back in the day. That the Floridas, Florida States, Georgias, Alabamas, they can't just stash talent anymore because they'll just transfer the next year, and you don't have that depth that you used to have.
Well, yeah, I mean, a perfect example, Kurt Cignetti at Indiana. He grabs a bunch of guys. They've avoided injuries, and they're really good. SMU, the same scenario.
Right.
I mean, we're seeing it all over, Mike, and we saw it with the rankings. As they throw those names out there, you're like, my goodness, Indiana probably should have been higher, but Boise State's up there. I mean, I don't know, Mike. I kind of enjoyed it. I was skeptical when it all came out about the 12-team playoff, et cetera, and then as it unfolded last night, I'm looking at the games on the schedule ahead, these right now elimination games coming up in several cases. I kind of like where college football is right now.
I love it. Again, I
Yeah.
don't like I don't like players opting out 4
No.
games into the season and saving their red shirt so they can enter the portal. I hate that aspect. of
Yes.
it. But as far as the 12-team playoff, are you kidding me? I mean, you've got all of this new blood. You're talking about Indiana, SMU, Brigham Young. You've got all of
BYU.
this, that you've got all of this new blood in college football, and I really, I just said it. I really do believe, I don't think Georgia's just going to be able to get into the college football playoff and roll over an Indiana or roll over a BYU. I think these games are going to be more competitive than people think they are.
Yeah, and we're seeing it with Alabama especially. A couple of losses. The Vandy loss is like, what the heck? Vandy's pretty good for all the reasons we've just discussed. So I think times have changed. We're not going back now because that playoff is going to, again, expand even more now in a few years in NIL, et cetera. And that's what we're in store for, Mike. We're a couple of old timers, and things are looking good, right?
As Bob Dylan once sang, the times they are a-changing. No question.
I love it. I love it. Did Bob Dylan ever come to Florida and we were there? I don't know. I don't think so. He might have. But we saw a lot of those bands. I remember when I was at the old Florida Alligator Alley and Christopher Cross came. I was like, remember that guy?
Oh, yeah, I remember Christopher Cross. He's
Yeah.
responsible for the wussification of America in the 1970s. He and Dan
Yes.
Fogelberg.
Yes, exactly. The old Dan Fogelberg legacy, yes, lives on. Hey, Mike, we appreciate it. I've taken a lot of your time. I do appreciate it, my man. And congratulations on all your success because longevity is something in our business that I look at very proudly. And you've been around a long time, and you just keep
Yeah,
doing
Doug,
what you're doing, man.
I keep waiting for them to fire me so I can retire, but they won't do it. Why?
Shh. No, don't give them any ideas.
Hey,
Mike,
I appreciate being on your show. It's been a lot of fun, Doug.
Thanks, bud.